2017, 7 p.m. Finance Committee meeting to order. Councilors, before we begin, out of respect for the victims that lost their lives last night, were seriously injured in Las Vegas, I'm going to ask that the City Council's Finance Committee please take a moment of silence. Our thoughts and prayers are with them.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
Councilors, just a couple points of information. Relative to tonight's agenda meeting, I did receive both a telephone call and an email from Chief Crowley, and he did give me ample time. It was last Tuesday. He sent me an email, "Sir, I will be traveling out of state and will not be available to attend the Finance Committee meeting scheduled for October 2nd. If need be, I can send a designee," and I know he did send the captain here. Respectfully,
Okay.
John Crowley, and the chief also left me a voicemail message. We will get to that agenda item, which I believe is going to be number 4. Also, when we get to agenda item number 5, I did receive an email on the 29th from Fire Chief Mike Williams. Deputy Chief Galligan is here tonight to answer any questions on this item. It relates to emergency medical dispatch training for fire alarm operators. The grant does go through the police department, and there is costs associated and billed out. It's mandatory training, and again, we can have Deputy Chief speak on that if you want to. We're going to go on to number 1, please, Madam Clerk.
Appointment of Claudia Donnell of 28 Bigney Avenue, Brockton, Massachusetts, to the Brockton Commission on Women's Issues for a 2-year term ending October 2019. Invited, Claudia Donnell.
Good evening. How are you tonight?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Do you have a statement for the committee, or?
I just would like to thank everybody here for giving me this opportunity to represent women in the Women's Commissioner. I also feel that any concepts that we might come up with for the women may very easily be turned over to other minority groups in the city. So I'm anxious and very excited to work on this committee. I think it's a long time overdue, and I'm glad I'm going to be part of it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Motion to recommend favorably.
The motion properly second, a favorable recommendation back to the full council. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, that motion carries. It's favorable, sent back to the full council. We'll vote on it next week.
All right. Thank you very much,
Good evening.
everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
We'll go on to number 2, please.
Appointment of Richard Johnson of 35 Longworth Avenue, Brockton, Massachusetts, to the Brockton Redevelopment Authority for a term of 5 years. Invited, Richard Johnson.
Mr. Johnson, good evening.
Good evening, how are you?
Good, thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Do you have a statement for the committee?
No, not really, just want to say thank you for allowing me to be here today.
Excellent.
Motion recommend favorably.
Second.
It's a motion, it was properly second. It's a favorable recommendation back to the full council. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, motion carries. It's a favorable recommendation back to the council. We'll vote on it next Tuesday night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilors, we will, of course, be having full council Tuesday night. Monday is the Columbus Day holiday, okay? Go on to number 3, please.
Appointment of John Baptiste Fleury of 55 City Hall Plaza, Brockton, Mass., as a constable in the city of Brockton for a term of 3 years. Invited, John Baptiste Fleury.
Mr. Fleury, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Do you have a statement for us at all?
No, I say, I'm a pleasure to let me, or they're giving the opportunity to serve my community from Brockton. Thank you.
Entertain a motion?
Motion to
Is there a
recommend
question,
favorably.
Counselor?
Just a question, yes.
Question, Mr. Falwell.
Good evening, sir. How are you
Good
doing?
evening.
Have you taken, is this your first time being a constable?
Yes.
It is. Have you taken any courses to understand the difference between a constable serving civil process and obviously people with law enforcement or arrest powers?
No.
Okay, I would strongly urge you to do that. It's not a condition of being approved by us, but there is a big distinction between being a constable and having any law enforcement powers. So as you begin this, what could be a second career for yourself, I would reach out and try to find I think there are some classes that different people offer, and you'll find it very beneficial.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. There is a motion. It was properly seconded, correct?
Yep.
Favorable recommendation back to the council. All in favor of that, please raise your hand. All opposed, a motion carries. Favorable recommendation back to the council. We'll vote on it formally next Tuesday night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Number 4, please.
Order appropriation of $1,964,000 from stabilization fund to fiscal year 17 police personal services retroactive payment, including all overtime, $644,000. Fiscal year 18 police personal services other than overtime, $1,190,000. Fiscal year 18 police personal services overtime, including impact and license overtime, $130,000. Conditional certification for fiscal year 19. Invited, Honorable Mayor Bill Carpenter, John A. Condon, Chief Financial Officer, John Crowley, Chief, Brockton Police Department.
Councilors, again, we do have Captain Williamson here, and before Mr. Conan speaks, I just want to give you a point of information. Much like when I was the city council president in 2014, I recently signed the MOA as acting mayor relative to this matter. Strictly, I had nothing to do with negotiations. I wasn't involved in collective bargaining. The city handled that. I strictly signed it as acting mayor because Mayor Carpenter has a conflict of interest since one of his sons is on the police force. So when you do see the MOA, you'll see my signature there as acting mayor. That's the only purpose on that. I wanted to disclose that for the record. Mr. Conan, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. President. Councilors, I can give you a brief summary of this contract, and as the council president indicated, he executed the MOA because of the mayor's conflict with his son, but he didn't participate in the negotiations. Neither did the mayor. We kept the mayor apprised of what was going on with those negotiations, let him know what was happening, but he wasn't at the table and was trying to stay apart because of the conflict with his son. The deal itself will look pretty familiar to you because you approved the firefighters' contract as a part of the budget, and this deal mirrors that contract almost exactly. So it's, the one difference, though, is it's being paid for from the stabilization fund as opposed to from regular revenues as the fire contract was. Stabilization fund balance today is $6.6 million and change, and this appropriation is for a little bit less than $2, so it'll bring the stabilization fund down to about $6.6 million. My certification letter is unconditional for fiscal 17, which was the first year of this contract, already passed. Fiscal 18, the year we're in right now, also unconditional. Fiscal 19, it's a conditional certification because we haven't set the budget yet, and it is coming from the stabilization fund. I will say, though, that most of the cost of this contract are in the first 2 years. The third year is the cheapest year, so the impact won't be as great as the first 2 years in the third year. In any case, it's a 3-year contract. The entire deal is retroactive to the beginning of last fiscal year, July 1, 2016, which was fiscal 17. And the biggest cost element was for the base pay increase, which is for 5.75%, which is exactly the same as what the firefighters got, and in fact is the same base pay settlement as all of the unions have received. All of our unions are now settled if you approve this contract, with the exception of the police supervisors union. We're still at the table with them. Everybody else has been settled on the city side. So it's 5.75% on base, and that's 2% the first year, 2% the second year, 1.75% in the third year. A second major piece of the contract is that, as in the fire contract, we gained a drug testing policy, and that policy cost about 5.25%. It's in different elements other than base pay, and that's what we paid for in the firefighter contract. And the drug policy is, with the exception of the wording as to the police union, the elements of it are the same as in the fire contract. It's basically a policy which is looking to treat as opposed to discipline. So you can, for suspicion of drug abuse, upon a reasonable suspicion, you can test. If once you've tested, the results of that test are done by an independent agency. The results are held confidential until a board specified in the contract reviews to determine if, in fact, the officers who said there was reasonable suspicion had reason to act in that fashion. It needs superior officers to make the initial determination, and this board consists of 2 ranking officers appointed by the chief and 2 union members to review that work, and if in fact they determine that the reasonable suspicion did exist, then we proceed, and the drug tests are released if they were positive. And if it's a tie vote, the 2-2, the chief breaks the tie, so management is in control of the process. If the person does pass through that scrutiny of the reasonable suspicion test and is in his first offense, then he has to go through mandatory treatment for 1 year. Before he comes back to work, he has to have a clean urine test, and he's subject to random testing for 1 year. If it's a second offense, it's 2 years of random testing. If it's a third offense, it's 3 years of random testing. And it's a 3 strikes kind of policy. After that, he's subject to the termination discipline. But the objective is to put the person into rehabilitation and hope that the medical treatment will allow him to come back to work and be a productive member. The policy provides that it is not, when the person is first tested and the drug testing is going on, he's put on a paid administrative leave, and the intention is that we not lose staffing in the police department. When that happens, we'd have to call in somebody on overtime to make sure we have the same level of staffing. We're not looking to reduce public safety staffing through this mechanism. Self-reporting is allowed. A person who does self-reporting isn't subject to the reasonable suspicion standard at first. That's a one-time option where he goes through rehab as if he'd been tested positively. After that, and it doesn't go on his record as having been a strike, after that, he's back to like any other officer, and if he's found to be reasonably suspicious. The officers who determine reasonable suspicion are going to get training in what kinds of activity or behavior would indicate that perhaps a drug abuse problem existed. And by the way, this is for drugs, not for alcohol. There's already a policy in place for alcohol. In exchange for that, as I said, we gave them 5.25%. It was mainly on the hazardous duty increase and a little bit on firearms to get it to the 5.25%. In addition to that, in the contract, like in the fire contract, we gave them a 2% step at 27 years of service. And finally, in order to close the contract, the firearms increase was an additional 1%, 0.5% in the second and third year of the contract. The officers are allowed, just as in the fire contract, to buy back 10 days of sick leave every year with notice. That's a sick leave reduction as opposed to a bonus. The leave gets reduced, and the payment, they have to have had 75 days on the books to qualify, and the payment gets paid into their deferred compensation plan. Finally, a union agreed that cadets, while they're in the academy, will get base pay only. None of the other pay elements will go to the cadets while they're in the academy. And the union agreed to convert one of its unrestricted personal days to a professional development day. That's basically what was in the contract, and I take any questions.
Councilor Falwell, please.
Mr. Condon, I just have a couple of technical questions and a procedural one, and I do know how many hours of extreme bliss go into these meetings with different unions. Am I right that it doesn't cover marijuana in terms of drug testing?
Well, it doesn't say it excludes. I have to look at that policy specifically, Councilor. If you give me a second, I'll look at that. But I thought it was all drugs.
The policy that is now going to be in the contract, is it true that it doesn't cover marijuana?
Let me look at it. I'd have to look at it.
Okay. And the only reason I ask while you're looking is that, you know, I don't have a particular hang-up on marijuana, but I wouldn't want someone in a high-speed chase if
Yeah.
you know, they're just coming off 2 days off and they've got
I
an
think
elevated level of THC. That's all.
If it doesn't, I'd have to look to really read through it, but if it doesn't, I think the issue is whether there's a urine test to test for marijuana.
Okay.
I'm not sure that there is.
All right,
I don't know the answer to that question. I will look through this for you.
The other question I had is that, and I do understand the sick leave buyback.
No more wrong.
Would that be at the rate that the sick days are earned, or would it be at the rate when they're cashed in? And the reason I ask is that if you're a patrolman and you're paid a certain amount, but then you get promoted to sergeant, you decide to cash 10 days in, obviously the amount that would be paid out would be much higher.
That's right.
If you were elevated in rank. And I was just curious about that.
Well, the answer to your first question is the marijuana is excluded specifically.
It is included.
It is excluded in the contract. And I'm looking to see.
That must be from your University of Wisconsin days, because it's excluded.
I defer any comment on my University of Wisconsin. I was a member of the Navy ROTC in the University of on a scholarship in those days, so that would not have been something I'd have been knowingly engaging in.
Well, you certainly wouldn't inhale anyway, so.
I'm just looking to see if I think it's probably at his current rate of pay, but yes, it's at his current rate of pay, Council.
Okay, in the last question, and I know how important it is to settle these, but because I'm sensitive to your conditional certifications, what is it that worries you? The level of state aid that may or may not be there?
Yes.
or some other factor that cautions you to hold back on a full certification?
I can probably give you a baker's dozen. I'll start as they just occur to my feeble brain here. First and foremost is that the city is balancing its budgets every year by the use of reserves. For example, the free cash appropriation for a number of years has gone to pay for ongoing expenses of the city. Second, the state has been increasing its unrestricted state aid to the city, not this Chapter 70. The Chapter 70 itself is now coming in at less than inflation as well for us, but the unrestricted state aid is coming in at just several $100,000 a year, and we're spending nearly $400 million, and we're spending nearly $400 million a year, so that is no longer keeping pace with our cost. Our revenue growth is exceeded by, that we can count on, is exceeded by the rate of growth in our fixed expenses, whether you're talking about a pension assessment, which goes up by several $100,000s a year and periodically goes up by more than that in case of bad performance or greater longevity in the part of the retirees. We have a reluctance in the city, which is reflected, I think, when you folks are out and about in the community, for the residents of the city to pay more in taxes or to pay more in fees. Some of that may be due to their economic circumstances in life. I'm not saying what the motivation is, but the fact is it's very hard to get support for either a tax increase or a rate increase, and we've never had a successful Proposition 2.5 override. I think we ought to have probably paid for some of the capital programs where we borrowed money, and we're getting substantial assistance from, say, the state, and we were in there as a city for pennies on the dollar, 20 cents, 30 cents. We'd have been better off, I think, if we tried to get the voters to support that. We never did. Had we done that, we'd have several $1 million more in the budget right now while those bonds are outstanding. We have a water system which at the moment doesn't fully cover its cost, which means that the general fund is subsidizing water cost, really. So the city has a known unfunded liability on the pension, which basically means what's the amount of money that we'd need to put into the system where we'd know we could pay every retiree's benefits as they came due over time with an assumption as to what rate of growth our pension investment earnings would be as opposed to what rate of growth would be in our ongoing payroll expenses. That's several $100 million. We're getting close to being funded. It would be 2033 before we're funded, but that needs to be increased. That increase is going to be annual to the tune of several $100,000 a year until that's paid. And then we've promised to pay our health insurance costs for our retirees when they've retired, and we're doing that on a pay-as-you-go basis. There's nothing put aside for that. I don't expect to be here in 2033. I hope I'm around but not working. And in 2033, if the pension system is paid off, we can begin perhaps to address that unfunded liability for the health insurance costs, but it's a big number. So all of that coming together makes me concerned, and we've managed by ducking and dodging and being as conservative as we could be to keep things afloat. And when people think, well, they're just crying wolf, I'd ask them to look at the level of staffing in City Hall today compared to, say, the late 80s, and the level of staffing in the school department today compared to just a few years ago. You know, we're losing services because most of the government services are provided by the people who work here, and as that staff goes down, there's only so much you can do by more efficiency and computerization. Classroom education, for example, that's not an awful lot of computerization there. That's kids in front of teachers, and we don't have the same number. So all of those say to me, we are gradually losing services to the public, and it's mainly because our costs go up faster than our revenues. It would be hard to say, though, with the people who are doing the work, especially the teachers and the public safety employees. I don't mean to disparage those who work in City Hall, especially those who work at night on the water and sewer or plowing the roads, but the ones who are really putting themselves a bit at risk or providing a really essential service are the teachers and public safety. So it's hard to say we're not going to pay them. I don't think that they're undercompensated, but I think we've reached fair deals with them, and we're asking a lot of them. Teachers in Brockton are teaching a different population than the teachers who are in Lexington or in Newton, and I think they deserve to get paid recognizing that. It's different to be a firefighter or a cop here in Brockton, you know that, Counselor, than it is in Bridgewater or down in the Cape. It's just a different job. So they're deserving of a little bit more money, and I hesitate to say we shouldn't be paying this. I agree with you. It's concerning because I don't see the revenues going up at the same rate. So that's the reason for the conditional certification.
Well, and I thank you for that detailed presentation. You know, the harsh reality is, I'm glad that this contract is going to be settled, but we cannot afford to lose bodies out of police, fire. I mean, we're on a skeleton crew here at City Hall. I don't think most people realize the volume of work that's done in auditing, the building department, the health department, certainly the police and fire. And I will say, if things don't change at the state level, or if there is some terrible event worldwide that threatens the ability of the state to continue to give us the revenues we need, I'm not sure the next round of contracts you're going to have the flexibility to do what you've done this time. I really think we're going to reach a point where we're going to have to call a timeout and say, we can maintain the level of benefits and we must maintain the level of staffing, but we're not going to be able to hand out the pay raises in the same percentages, because frankly, folks, I don't have a lot of faith that the state is suddenly going to step forward and help us or any other cities and towns. I think we're in that area where we do have to worry every year. So I appreciate all of the work that you and the team have done, and with that, I thank the chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Cruz, please.
Actually, my question was about the conditional certification also, so unfortunately, I hear your answer loud and clear, so thank you very much.
Any other questions for Mr. Condon on this matter? Mr. Rodriguez, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Condon, can I just ask you a quick question? We have talked a lot in this building about the GIC plan that the state provides. What is holding the city back from, like, seriously researching and finding out whether or not we can sign on to that plan, knowing that it could save us millions of dollars?
Well, it's a history lesson, actually. If you recall, I think during Mayor Balzotti's term, the city made a proposal to the city council that the council approved. It takes a council vote to join it. And the city executive branch made that proposal to the city council, and it didn't receive support from the councilors. I'm not going to say who was here and who wasn't. It's changed. The reason it didn't receive support was that the plan basically took away from the unions their right to collectively bargain health insurance costs. And for that reason, the council said, we're not going to approve this. Go back to the table with these unions and see if you can come to an agreement, which is done through collective bargaining. We did that, and we reached an agreement which created a public employee health committee, which is staffed by all the members of the union and retirees. Proportionally, retirees get 10%. And we reached an agreement on the schedule of benefits for all of the health plans, including the retiree health plan at that time. And it saved a couple $1 million a year. I forget the exact number, call it 2.5, I think was about the amount of money. So it saved substantially, but it didn't save all that we could have saved had we gone to the GIC. But it also preserved some labor peace in the city, because I can remember the evening that presentation was made to City Council, and the room was full of teachers and firefighters and police officers who were really distressed by it. Now, most communities in Massachusetts took advantage of it. Brockton didn't. But we got probably 75% of the benefit we would have got by doing the collective bargaining, and we got there. That agreement expired at the beginning of this fiscal year, so last winter we went back to the table, and we got the agreement of that committee to extend it, and there was another concession. We got it off the top of my head. I don't remember what that concession was. I didn't come prepared to talk about the PEC, but there was the Public Employee Committee, but there was an additional concession that the city gained at that time, which we said, okay, let's extend it for one more 4-year cycle, and the reason is we got most but not all of the benefit that was in the GIC. I know what we got. We got an annual deductible that wasn't in the plans before. So that's the reason. We could have then said, we're coming back to the city council with a request to join the GIC. I suspect that we'd have got the same reception here, or at least with respect to the unions, as we got when we brought it here before. I don't think there was an awful lot of support for it then, and we got beat up pretty badly for even bringing it forward, the executive branch. So that's why I think you're probably, like I said, sitting on 75%, but not 100% of the benefit you could get if you went to the GIC.
And in terms of dollars, what are we talking about? What would it actually, what's the, I mean, we're spending about 50-something million dollars in the overall benefits package in the city. If we were to join that, what would those numbers be like?
I don't know off the top of my head, Counsel. I can get you that information, but off the top.
But it would be a couple $1 million, would you say?
Additional? Well, at this point, it's moot. We've agreed to extend that Public Employee Committee for 4 years. So, it's a question I could get the answer for you. With the concession they granted us, the difference between the plan that they approved and we agreed to 4 years ago and what is offered by the GIC now, much of that went away because we got that annual deductible. So I don't think it's the same as $1 million or $1.5 million or whatever I said it was back 4 years ago, but I'd have to look to see what the difference is. We haven't costed the GIC against that new plan. I just don't have that with me.
But I would appreciate it if you could actually get that to us, if you could, because not to pull the old Dave from the movie Dave, when people are adding and subtracting numbers, but if there's a way to save a few more positions, a few more dollars in the sense, I don't know why we wouldn't be able to push something like that in terms of, saving the taxpayers some money and at the same time, providing more services to the folks in the community. So I would be interested in getting that information if you could. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Counsel, you have good taste in movies. Good taste. Any other questions for the council for
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman,
Condon?
if I could just pick up on what my colleague said.
One second, Mr. Falwell,
Oh, I'm
before we
sorry.
go follow up. Any new questions from any new councilors? Go to Mr. Falwell then.
No, if you are going to look at the cost difference, I think we ought to look at the deductibles too, because my understanding is there are some communities that are pulling out of GIC and that the deductibles have gone up, I won't say significantly, but they may be different than ours. So we've got to compare both plans in terms of.
Yeah, that isn't a quick study, Counselor. I'll attempt to get the information, and if I'd known the question was coming as a part of this discussion, I'd have attempted to have it tonight. It is moot. We've agreed to a 4-year extension, and I think we can inform the council of that. And I will remind you that the proposal was not well received at the time it was made by the city's employees, nor by this chamber. So we'll go again. But my expectation was back at the time we agreed to extend, we got a major concession as a result, that it would be accepted here as being the best choice for the city. But I'll get your information for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Condon?
Motion recommend favorably.
Second. There's a motion made, properly seconded, favorable recommendation back to the council. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, that motion carries. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Condon.
councilors.
The favorable recommendation back to the full city council. If we could go on to the next agenda item, please.
Order appropriation of $175,649.39 from Massachusetts Executive Office of Public Safety and Security State 911 Department Training Grant and EMD Regulatory Compliance Grant to City of Brockton Police Department State 911 Training Grant and EMD Regulatory Compliance Grant Fund. Invited, Honorable Mayor Bill Carpenter, John A. Condon, Chief Financial Officer, John Crowley, Chief, Brockton Police Department.
Deputy Chief, good evening.
Good evening, councilors.
Councilors, I made a statement at the beginning why Deputy Chief is here tonight on the fire department, and of course, Captain Williamson's here from the police, but the deputy should be able to answer any questions. Thank you for being here tonight.
This is the annual grant that we received from the State 911 Department that funds the required training for 911 call takers and fire department emergency medical dispatchers. Each person is required to have 16 hours of training each year, and this grant funds the overtime for them to attend the training or the backfill that goes with that. In addition, it tends to fund some equipment annually.
Thank you.
Move to recommend favorably.
Second. Motion made, properly seconded. Favorable recommendation back to the council. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, that motion carries. Thank you, Deputy. It's a favorable recommendation back to the full council. We're going to go on to number 6, please.
Order that the City Council acquire the most current list of city-used, foreclosed, and deeded property presently in the possession of the City of Brockton from the Treasurer-Collector. Invited, Martin S. Brophy, Treasurer-Collector.
Mr. Brophy, good evening. And first of all, I just want to recognize and thank you. I know we received this email last week and also a hard copy as well, so thank you for you and your staff for getting that. Any statement or just questions? Any questions?
Who filed this? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Thank you. I filed the resolve, and I believe my colleagues that are on the subcommittee for real estate We had an unusual incident earlier this year where in one room, they were discussing a piece of property and what was happening with it. And in this room, it was on our real estate, agenda. So that was one of the reasons. But we were curious because there's so many things here. And I have to admit, now that I'm looking at this, it says deeded properties. Could we have a little bit of an explanation on this? Because it says, use of property inhabitants of Brockton. I'm sorry, I think it's kind of funny.
Again, Counselor, when I created this list,
Yes,
everything that is under a Class 903, which is City of Brockton, was part of the list that the assessors gave me. Those
Okay.
came across, and I saw inhabitants of the City of Brockton, kind of did a little research, and it was deeded to the city. That's what the deed says, to the inhabitants of the City of Brockton. Put it aside. It wasn't foreclosed.
okay.
Again, I was trying to get a clean possessions list that I reconciled to the ledger.
Sure,
So anything that I came across in the list from the assessors, whether it was this building, all the schools, cemeteries,
sure,
I moved it
okay.
out of the list so that I could have an accurate dollar amount for possessions that I could reconcile to the ledger.
Okay. Okay, so people deeded this various property,
I don't recall. I moved it, again, pulled it off the list early on when I saw.
so you're talking when you first became
It'd
the,
be 12 years ago when I started, 15 years ago that I started creating this list.
okay,
I mean, again, this building is on the list with the assessors as city property, but it's not a
Point of
possession.
information, if I could, I'll give you an example. I
Okay,
know
I
for a
mean,
fact
this-
some property that had not paid taxes.
Yes.
The person passed away, the heirs did not want to pay the taxes, they deeded that lawfully over, a quitclaim deed, deeded in lieu of foreclosure to the city. So it would be a deeded property to the city. That's just an example, but it does happen.
okay, no, I didn't doubt that part. I mean, when you see this and it says, South Fair
That's what the
Drive.
deed says. I
Yes,
mean,
and-
that's what the assessors have in the assessors database.
Okay, so now I guess I'm going to ask the question, can this property be sold? Because the city, I'm understanding that the city owns
Again,
it.
if it was deeded, it'd have to be approved through council.
Okay,
It's surplus property.
all right, as surplus property, okay, so this is one
Again,
of the
my goal
things.
was to get an accurate possessions list with a dollar amount that would be on the ledger. Because when I started this list, the number wasn't accurate and there was no list.
Oh, wow, well, that's, so, no, we need the list, so I'm sorry, this was one of the questions I want to ask. I'll defer to my colleagues, and then I'll come back, if
Okay,
that's all
thank you,
right.
Counsel. Counsel Fowle, you had a question, followed by Counsel Barnes?
No, I was just
Didn't
going
have a
to,
question.
I was going to raise a point of information with Councilor Beauregard that perhaps this should go back to council and then go to real estate so that all of this material could be properly examined and digested rather than this evening with full council, but.
Yeah, and I did confer with the Chair of Real Estate, Councilor at-Large Rodriguez. He concurs with that. He thinks it's a good thing to do as well.
It's fine, too.
So again, you can't go committee to committee. It would have to go to the full council and then out of the council back to real estate. But I know Councilor Barnes had a question on this matter.
I'll actually defer if it's going to go to real estate.
Point of reference?
Thank you.
I'm the
Yes.
clerk to real estate,
Yes,
so I can't be invited and be the clerk at the same time.
You can be invited and have a proxy sit in as the clerk.
As long as I can get one to do it, so, yeah.
Just pay him. They'll go. So we'll entertain a motion at this time then.
Motion to send back to the full city council.
Second.
Motion made, properly second, favorable recommendation back to the full city council. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, that motion carries. Favorable recommendation back to full council. Again, Mr. Brophy, thank you for all
you.
your data.
yeah, thank you.
Going to go on to number 7, please.
Order that the City Council authorizes the mayor to enter into an intermunicipal agreement between the City of Brockton, Town of Avon, and T.L. Edwards, Inc., a Massachusetts corporation with its principal place of business at 100 Wales Avenue, Avon, Mass., for wastewater. Invited, Honorable Mayor Bill Carpenter, Philip C. Nasrallah, Solicitor, Larry Rowley, Commissioner, Department of Public Works, Terry L. Edwards, owner, T.L. Edwards, Inc.
Council Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a little bit, I filed this a little bit early, and we're kind of putting the cart before the horse. There is some information that Avon and the DPW have to work on, so I'm going to make a motion to table this.
Second.
Second.
Motion made, properly seconded, table. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, it's tabled.
Okay.
Number 8, please.
Order, the City Council authorizes the mayor to enter into an inter-municipal agreement between the City of Brockton, Town of Avon, and T.L. Edwards, Inc., a Massachusetts corporation with its principal place of business at 100 Wales Avenue, Avon, Mass. for water. Invited, Honorable Mayor Bill Carpenter, Philip C. Nasrallah, Solicitor, Larry Rowley, Commissioner, Department of Public Works, Terry L. Edwards, owner, T.L. Edwards, Inc.
Counsel Cruz.
This is the same project, so I'm going to make a motion to table.
Second.
Motion made, properly seconded. All in favor of tabling, please raise your hand. All opposed, motion carries. That matter is tabled. We'll go on to the last agenda item, number 9, please.
Resolve to invite the Chair of the Traffic Commission and the Commissioner of the Department of Public Works to discuss the procedures involved with both the winter parking ban and the snow emergency policies and their implementations to prepare for the upcoming season. Invited Larry Rowley, Commissioner, Department of Public Works, Robert DeBerry, Captain, Traffic Commission.
Counsel, whose resolve is this?
Mine?
Okay. Good evening. Rowley, thank you for being here.
I don't know who you want to talk to, so we're both here.
Captain, thank you for being here. Counsel, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you. I filed this resolve because I am not the only individual on city council that has received calls during the two things here. We have the winter parking ban and the snow emergency. And it's been a predicament, and we're not pointing fingers at one group and saying you're not doing your job. That's not the case. But we seem to be having lots of dilemmas where people call us, I can't get out of my driveway, my street hasn't been plowed, and I know there is not a conspiracy out there, we're not plowing your street because we don't feel like it. That's not the case. You're going out and plowing the streets, and I believe sometimes you're coming across challenges where they can't do the street the way they would like to because there's cars parked. And I had a lot of trouble understanding the difference between the parking ban and the snow emergency, because quite frankly, I thought they were the same. Because when you think of winter, you think of snow. So there was a few things that we wanted, cleared up and addressed so that we could maybe have a smoother situation in the future, because I realize, even though our deputy fire chief just left, we always want to make sure that the emergency vehicles can get down the streets. And, I mean, last year I had a call from an elderly woman. The nurse couldn't come. She had a visiting nurse because they couldn't get down the street. And again, I'm not blaming the DPW, because cars were parked all over the place. I don't see how you guys could have gotten in there and maneuvered a plow. I mean, I have a little sedan, and I would have had trouble spinning around. So that's the kind of, situation that we're trying to address and how would I say it, get somewhere so that, I mean, what do we do here to resolve, both steps here?
Well,
Is there like a connection and a way we can better communicate to the residents? We do get those reverse 911s, which I think are terrific, but, I mean, in some instances, I'm sure people are listening to them and not exactly, how would I say, adhering to them. So, that's...
Well, I have to say that my biggest problem during snow is parked cars,
Okay.
and it has been for years. So that's why you have the winter parking ban in effect. It starts December 1st to April 1st.
Yes.
And there's no parking on the even side of the street. I always get that a little confused.
Yeah, me too.
But when we declare a snow emergency, councilors, it's usually, it's all on the storm, how much snow we're gonna get. And we usually try to get the police involved 2 hours before that we issue that warning. So they go out, they try to get the residents to move their vehicles. It's, everything we do during snow is a public safety issue, because I have to get the plows down there, or the salt trucks that get down there in case there's an emergency. So with that being said, it's the cars, and we offer off-street parking. We open the parking garage. There's 4 other lots. I can name them for you if you want.
Okay.
I call it the White Ave parking lot, but it's right at White Ave and Montello Street.
Okay.
We have the South Street parking lot right off of South Street. We have Eggers Park because that is a really congested area for us, Brook Street, Levitt, all that. I can never get plows down there, so that's why we offer that. And we have the Howard School and the Whitman School, so we try to get it all over the city to remove these vehicles. In all honesty, we inconvenience your constituents or our residents maybe 4 or 5 times a year. We average 4 or 5 storms a year, except back in 2015 when we had a lot more than that. But on an average, it's 4 or 5. So all we're asking, and we do this, we reverse 911, we try to do it twice before a storm, and we also have it in a Cape Verdean radio station and a Haitian radio station, so we get it out there. So I don't know what else we can do. I don't know if anyone has any ideas here, but I think what we have in place is working. We don't like to tow cars because it's an expense to your constituent and the residents. We hate to tow cars, but we have to. And that's when Captain DeBarry comes in. We try to get 4 to 6 officers every storm. We used to have 4 on each end of the city, but now it's been so busy with these people that won't remove their cars. And what bothers me is they have driveways and they won't pull them in the driveways either. And they're all repeat offenders. So I have to get the cars out of the streets to do my job properly, or else I'm going to hear from all of you, just like you said, the lady can't get out. I mean, it's probably because of parked cars.
Oh, yeah.
That holds my operation up a few hours every storm. So I think we have a good policy in place. It's just a matter of the residents working with us.
Okay,
So I wish you could get that out in all your ward meetings, if you could just ask them. Like I said, we don't inconvenience them that much. It's 4 or 5 times a year. Please remove your car. And we do offer off-site. The parking garage is always open during a snow emergency.
we have
So with that being said, I'm open for any questions. I'll try to answer them.
Okay. I'm
Council
sorry.
Barnes had a question.
Okay, you can, I'll defer to my
Councilor Barnes,
colleagues,
please.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, Mr. Commissioner Rowley and Captain DeBarry. Just a couple of questions. So I don't know if it was last year, maybe it was the year before, when we had a lot of snow, 2015, 16, or whatever. A lot of people were calling because, and it's kind of like the catch-22. So the plows were coming through on the streets, but there was no place to put the snow, and the snow was just kind of getting, pushed up against fences and different people's property. And then when it all melted, then they realized, well, a fence post was ripped up, or something was taken off their property. What's the procedure for the residents, I guess, filing a complaint, or is it just kind of a casualty of snow wars, or how does that work?
I can
with the
say,
mounds?
Council, in 2015, we had so much snow, and it's our fault because we tell the plow drivers to push it back as much as you can, because the first storm is the most important storm, because the windrows keep narrowing, and some of the side streets were only like one ways.
Right.
But to answer your question, no, we paid out over $100,000 in fence damage, walls, and everything else. All they had to do was write it, and the mayor got that out pretty well. He addressed that. Just send a letter to the law office, and we would look it up, and if we did the damage, because there was a lot of damage done by their own private plows, so we investigated every claim that we had, and we paid them.
Okay, so the residents are to know in
And we still-
anticipation.
And we still do.
Okay, so in
If it's
anticipation for this
legit
year,
and it's done by a city plow during this plow operation, we will pay for it.
document and send a letter to the city solicitor, or to the
Yes.
mayor's office, or your
Mayor's
office?
office, city solicitor, and then they forward it up to me, and then we do the investigation.
Okay, all right, that's good to know. I think people will find that helpful. Now, I don't know if this is, urban legend or whatever, but the snow farm over at the fairground, first of all, is that a real thing, or is that something that was just made up in the streets?
I think that was just done for the 2015 year. We had so much snow, we had no place to put it.
Okay.
We had some satellite snow farms, too, all over the city. We had some down at the sewer treatment plant. We had some up at DW Field parking lot, and we dumped some up in there.
Okay, that's actually my question. So some of the excess snow that was collected or removed from the area, those were deposited on city property. Being that the fairground is private property. Did we have to pay for that? Because there was controversy about that.
We did have to pay some, yes.
How
Yes, I
much?
think we paid $100 a truckload.
$100 a truckload.
We didn't use it that much. Wherever we could put snow when it got filled, and we had no place else to put it.
Okay. Okay, so we had to pay. Okay. Excuse me. One thing. So, Council Borg had mentioned about the reverse 911. I get those all the time, and I try to utilize the garage, because I don't want to get snowed in, and I want to be respectful for the plow, especially on my street, my little street. It's really, hard to get through. So, you said that you advertise on the different radio stations for folks, for non-English speakers or speakers of different languages. Do those calls go out in other languages as well, in case I'm not listening to my radio or don't have a radio, or? Because I only get the English ones.
I don't think they do.
No, okay,
I don't think they do.
okay,
But it's not a bad idea. Maybe we can look into doing that.
okay. Just record like a couple and send them out.
Yeah.
Oh, and you mentioned the other schools, so the Howard School, Whitman School, some of these other places. What about the Shaw School for a satellite parking lot for folks? Can you use that one? Because that's empty over there on the east side there.
We could.
Okay.
Yeah, we could. We'll
Okay.
look into that also.
Okay, and let's just say we have we have storms like we did in 2015. I pray we don't. Is the city amenable to hiring like private companies or actually, let me back up. Would the city ever hire like a private company? For instance, if I'm outside shoveling, busting my back, shoveling, somebody comes up to me and they say, we are authorized by the city to plow you out, you just have to pay, $40, blah, 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 and they end up being like scammers or something. Would the city ever hire out a private company to do work on behalf of the city?
Well, Council, we do hire. We hire between 160 and 180 pieces of equipment every year.
Well, no, I'm not talking about industrial equipment, I'm just saying like little mom and pop, like Mr. Plow or something, like.
We hire a company that has 3 or 4 pieces of equipment. It's not all like a Dorenzo or Carnegie. We do hire some small companies.
Oh, okay, so it's not all a scam if somebody, okay.
But Council, point of information, that would be for streets. It wouldn't be for someone to go to someone's private driveway.
Yeah, see, that's why I was, okay, that's why I was confused. So that would not happen. The city would not contract with someone to, some old ladies out there plowing, and they'd come, hey, let's help you out, like, just throw me $40 or whatever.
No.
No, okay, all right. Okay, that's it for now. Thank you, gentlemen, thank you,
Thank you,
Mr.
Council. We're going
Chairman.
to go to Council Ianary, followed by Farwell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, I know you mentioned a couple of the different parking lots that we utilize to have vehicles go to when there is a storm coming into play. One of which I want you to make a note in your mind now, because December 1st is really around the corner, but the South Street parking lot, and as you know, is never really empty. And there's always a little problem there. There's been a problem there since we repaved it a couple years ago. And that's because the market across the street parks their trucks there.
Correct.
And I'm not even sure what the price is. Anytime I ask, I don't really get a straight answer. But my concern is, when you do have a snowstorm situation, I hope that he knows that he has to move them out of there.
Well, Councilor, that comes under the parking authority, that lot there.
Right.
So-
Yeah, that, and also, I don't want to be rude, but anytime you do mention to the people there, it always comes down to, the mayor says we can park there. So,
Okay, I'm not aware of that. All I know is we keep all these satellite parking lots.
I'm just making mention that when a storm does hit, and I mean, I have no problem talking to the parking authority about it. I will talk to Bob before winter comes, because it is an issue, and it's not a good issue, because people right now can't even utilize it the correct way that it needs to be utilized either. But nothing seems to be, within that Campello section area and the business people there, every time we bring it up, it just seems to fall on a deaf ear, which it shouldn't fall on a deaf ear. But in any case, I just want to make comment back to, and I agree with you, a lot of the same people you have difficulties with are the same usual offenders, and we know where they are, and I know just how how I do it as a ward councilor. There's no effect on how other ward councilors do it. They have the right to do it the way they want to. But when a storm does hit, and whenever I have the availability to be out of my driveway and it's open, even if I'm told I shouldn't be on the road, I am on the road, because I sort of monitor what's going on and where some of these cars could be parked, and that's how I had a few problems. Captain DeBarry knows we had a problem just on Longwood Avenue just last winter, on and off, but all the time, on and off. It took us a week to conquer a situation, even this past winter, and it wasn't a bad winter, but still. That's just how I have to take a look at it myself. So, all in all, I mean, I don't think there's ever going to be an easy answer to how you resolve it and people to understand it, because people just don't want to understand it, and it makes it difficult. But I just want to, I put a plus in because I know it's not easy. It's not, it's something that has to be done, but it's not easy task when winter does come and you're trying to move these cars around, and you don't want to tow cars because it does make a different situation. But I just, commend you for the work that you do in the winter months, which to me I think is pretty positive. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Councilor. Councilor Falwell, followed by Councilor Ezek, please.
Yeah, just very quickly, gentlemen, the reason this came up is that some people did not have cars removed on their street where on other streets we did tow. Whether we like it or not, the city is divided into census tracts that have some economic parameters, and if we only tow in those areas and we don't tow in others, then we're not uniformly and consistently enforcing that citywide ban. So basically what we have is we have a ban, and we don't have enough police, and we don't have enough overtime to go into every single neighborhood and hook every single car during a snowstorm. So I don't know what the answer is. To me, I'd concentrate on the first fire district where you have very densely populated areas, buildings close together, something down on 11th Avenue in Ward 4 or Cricket Road up in Ward 7, I don't think is the same as West Park Street or one of those streets. But I do caution that if we're going to have a citywide snow emergency with no parking on streets, we've got to really be fair and make sure, even in my neighborhood, if somebody's parked on my road and they're not supposed to be there, the cruiser should come along and tow them. Because if we don't, we run the risk of somebody saying we're kind of being a little discriminatory in how we enforce the ban. So I don't handle the day-to-day operations. I know, Captain DeBarry, you're involved, but I just think we need to think about that.
During the operation, my guys take their orders from the plows. So if the plow can't get down the street, they call my guys on the radio. I have 4 cars on Myrtle Street, need to be removed. So if they can get down the street, we're not wasting the time to tow something that might be on the road that's not hampering the plows getting up and down the street. So we take out the cars first that are hampering the plows that can't get down the street. So that's how that works. And then once we get those out, wherever the plows go, whether they, if they need help getting by, they call their area guy, they go down and they tow the cars.
So that would be an area where there's parking on both sides and you can't get a plow down? Because if
Sometimes
somebody's
on one
just...
side.
Well, if somebody's just parked on one side...
During a snow emergency, there's no parking on any city street.
That's correct, but obviously you'd be able to get down a street if they're only on one side. My problem is the people who call me and say, I shoveled out my driveway and there was a car parked so that the plow had to go all the way around it and plowed all that snow, about 6 feet out from the edge of the road, and they have to take care of that. Right. That's the problem, because some people they're older and they can't do it. So I'm just asking you to be sensitive about it.
We've towed, on an average, last February 9th, the storm we had, we towed 99 cars. We had 313 cars moved so that we didn't have to tow.
Good.
A couple of days later, on the 12th, we towed 93 cars, had 165 moved. And then back in March, 55 towed, 165 moved. So our goal is to try to get them moved first. And prior to the storms for the winter parking, we go out and put 2 to 3 nights, spread over a couple of weeks. We put these bright orange winter parking ban information on their windshield if they're parked illegally, so that and believe me, we've been out there, and night after night after night, the same car has 3 of them. So that's part of the problem. So we do that usually 2 to 3 nights. Prior, just leading up to the winter parking ban,
Well,
midnight to 7.
I do sincerely thank you for what really is an impossible task. I mean, it is. It's a ban that we're never going to be able to fully implement. We're just going to have to do the best
We'll never be able to get
we
every
can.
car off the road. It's just
You're right.
not gonna happen.
You're right. Thank you.
Thank you, Counsel. Counsel Azak, followed by Monahan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, gentlemen. Mike, I know it's a hard job. It's very difficult every year. Hopefully, we don't see a winter like we did a few years ago. Commissioner, you mentioned at the beginning how else we could do it. I know it's already on social media, it's on the city website, so it is a hard task. The city is doing the best it can. I think the residents, if they're repeat offenders, there's nothing else we can do besides the job that the police department's doing and the DPW. My comments towards, you mentioned the different areas that we stored the snow a few years ago. One of them was DW Fields Park, and there was a little controversy there, and I want to commend the DPW as well as the Parks Department, which I didn't realize, but everyone is aware that where the snow is coming from when it is stored. I know that I got many calls, and there was a lot of misunderstanding on social media. People were concerned about contaminated snow that was being stored at DW, and after speaking numerous times to yourself, Commissioner, and the Parks Department Commissioner, Tim Carpenter, it was clear that this snow came specifically from the sidewalks that is not treated with salt. So I just want to clarify that even though with the chaos of everything, the city is, keeps it under consideration where the snow is coming from, where it's going, and did their best to deal with the situation, the emergencies that happened. So I just wanted to clarify that came up, and we never mentioned it in the few years, but I know that it was crazy, and we did receive a lot of calls. So I want to commend the city for doing what you did, as well as the Parks Department, and keeping DW Fields Park uncontaminated. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Monahan, please.
Yeah, I just was going to ask you, I think you followed it up, but basically was, when the plows are going down the roads, do they call in to have cars moved or towed if need be? And you answered that already.
Yeah, we have our route foreman, city employees' route foreman, and they check their whole routes. We have 55 routes in the city. And if they find it's going to be a hindrance to the salt truck or a plow, then we'll call Captain DeBarry, and he dispatches his men over there to remove the cars.
And the pamphlets, the papers that you put on those cars, are they in different languages?
No.
Maybe we want to do that down the road, because maybe they can't read it, especially if it's in the neighborhoods in the ward, my ward, if it's down.
You have a tough ward.
Yeah, and you have a lot of immigrants there that probably don't speak English, and those cars, maybe they don't even know what those are for. And that's really an area where they're parking on both sides and everything else, too, so that might be a suggestion. Thanks.
It's a good suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Cruz, please.
Thank you. Captain DeBarry, you said that sometimes you go out and there's 3 of those in a car.
Yeah.
Third one, shouldn't it be a ticket?
Yeah, just curious about that.
We're out there just to inform the public when we're doing these, so we do not put tickets. But we will go out, I believe, after we've done this 3 times, we'll go out and write tickets.
And do you know what the fine is?
Yeah.
$50.
50, and maybe we need to put that up a little higher, and maybe they'll get the message. Because it's, basically it is, I know from the calls I get, we know it's always the same 2, 3, 10 people. I can tell you right now which houses in my ward I'm going to have to call on, and I'm fortunate that I have Ward 1 where a lot of the streets are wider, and even if Commissioner Rowley has to go around the car, a fire truck can still get down the street, whereas you get in the first fire district and all, you have to tow them, you have to get them off the street, because one car can keep a fire truck for 3 weeks from getting down the street. So I think maybe if a few well-placed tickets, those people will get the message, and if we have to look at raising the fine, maybe that's how we get the message across to these people. So, thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Councilor.
Councilor Ezek, you had a follow-up?
Yes, just to follow up to my colleagues that have mentioned about the different languages. In this situation, I just find that it's going to be very difficult. As much as diverse as we are, the languages on each street are going to be diverse. How would the police department or anybody know what language that specific car or that house or anybody speaks? So I think it's also, we need to educate, as city councils, maybe educate our constituents, have them at our meetings, as well as we need to get the community involved in this and get them to do their part as well, to be informed. I know we do mailings on it, the DPW does mailings with the parking ban, so I think we have to do our part also, and the community has to. We can't just keep putting blame out there, and I'm all about diversity in languages, but that's almost impossible to do in every language that's in the city of Brockton, so.
Thank you, Councilor. I was thinking, what about sending home notices K through 12 students in the public school systems?
Well, that's what I was just thinking of too, Counselor. Maybe we can get this into the schools.
I think, that's a natural with
Yeah.
Kathy Smith working to get it done.
Yeah.
That way, we know it's getting into the household.
Yeah, great idea.
And that way, I concur with you, there's many languages spoken, but there is a majority of languages that tend to be utilized in the city of Brockton that we could perhaps use those as the priority ones.
Mhm.
But I think using like a back-to-home type of campaign, I think that makes sense. Councilor Rodriguez, I know you had a question.
Yeah, I do. Well, I have a sidewalk question that I wanted to ask, but I wanted to touch bases on this language issue as well. We all know that in the city of Brockton, 95% of the population of this city are covered by 4 languages. And a single piece of paper with a little note that says, there's a parking ban, please remove your car. We're not chiseling this in stone, so the same printer that's printing the English notes can actually add a line or two. And if you do it in Portuguese, Spanish, French, and English, I think you cover about 95% of the population of the city.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I know we continue to push the issue that we have, all this diversity in the city. I speak 5 different languages myself. But the vast majority of the people in this community speak about two or three of the languages that I speak. So to make a statement that we're not really going to push the issue of, we know, for instance, in Ward 2, Ward 3, that those areas, or Ward 4, the center core of the city, are affected by, in terms of the traffic issues in that area. The vast majority of the people, it's not that they don't speak English, but they might not be able to read it enough to understand what the issue is. So it wouldn't hurt the city administration or city government, in the sense, to provide information to them to make us, if we're sitting here complaining that this is a problem, and a solution might be a simple one-liner or two-liners in your bill, either the water bill that goes out or these notices that you put out. So I don't think it's actually going to be a major issue in terms of informing the community. But I honestly think that if we're going to continue to look into the city and make sure that everybody is buying into what we're trying to sell, I think we need to step up a little bit and try to reach out. We can't say, well, it was in the Enterprise, where, maybe only about 10% of the people in Brockton are now reading the Enterprise. So we can't just be satisfied for the fact that we put it on the Enterprise, knowing that the vast majority of the people aren't reading the Enterprise. It might have been that way back in the 40s, 50s, 60s. It's not in 2017. So I think we need to do a little bit more on our own. There's plenty of churches in our community. My church up on the north side of the city, there's 1,200 people that go to Mass on a Sunday. If the city wants to inform that community, it's not that hard to put some information on the bulletin at the church, so that there's 1,200 more people that understand what's going on in the city. And I'm speaking for one church, where the other ones do exist as well. So we could actually do a variety of things to try to go above and beyond. If it's a problem and we try to fix the problem, to me, it's kind of dumb to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, because apparently towing isn't really doing us any good. And a lot of times, people sometimes look at things and say, I don't understand why my car was towed. I've parked here all year. They don't quite understand that there's a ban and when those bans start. And sometimes the ban goes into effect when the weather is as it is today, basically. So I think it's important for us to to do our part as a city government to inform the entire community as best as we possibly can. Because those radios that you mentioned, a lot of us don't listen to it. But there's ways of, water bills, we all get one of those. Perhaps we can add something on the bills that come home. Perhaps we can put out information on the government channel in various different languages. Again, it's a couple lines. It's not that big of a deal, But I think we need to be a little informant of that stuff so that the individuals can kind of help us out as well.
There's also the ones that we have where we get a call to come tow a car, and you can see them watching out the window until we clean the car off, get the license plate. The tow truck guy comes in, cleans the car off a little bit, then goes to hook it up, and then they come running out. Oh, I'll move it.
Yeah, well, you know what?
Just used us to clean their car. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. You can I live on Summer Street, you can do that online once in a while. It would help out. But you know what? You've got a lot of individuals that live in areas where there's no parking. They can't park in the driveway that, some of them are not as fortunate as some of the rest of us with the bigger driveway, so people rely on street parking. So those issues are gonna come up, but I think we need to work with the individuals before we can actually go beyond this stuff. I mean, if there's a possibility, when we're going out informing, we might as well do the informing instead of just saying, well, we kind of informed.
Sure.
That's just, and I'd be willing to work with you guys on that stuff as well too, on my own, or whatever other information I can actually help, one, to translate on paper, two, to pass on to other individuals. We'll pass that along, and sometimes it frustrates the daylights out of me where we've got resources within our grasps and we don't take advantage of the resources that we have. There's a lot of us that are willing to do a bit more, but yet we're not approached or asked to do the bit more. So I'm putting that out here that this one is willing to do a little bit more to inform the community, so if you need help with that stuff, please let me know. But I wanted to, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to ask, about 3 years ago, we put in an ordinance to change the way we looked at sidewalks in the first fire district, in terms of making sure that these businesses are cleaning their sidewalks. I know it's kind of depressing that we're talking about cleaning, snow from sidewalks, but what can we do in terms of enforcing the ordinance that's in the books? Because I'm going to tell you right now, there's a bank in the downtown area that's probably doing pretty well financially, but every year, that bank barely cleans its sidewalk. And what it ends up happening, you've got this little trail of people, they begin to walk, and you've got this winding trail of where the sidewalk is. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense that we have these rules in the books, and yet nobody follows these rules. I remember when I brought that idea to the council is because I was standing by the post office, and an older lady took a fall right in front of me, walking on the sidewalk of the post office in the downtown area. But you've got plenty of businesses in the downtown area on Main Street, our Main Street, and you drive down other main streets in Massachusetts, it doesn't compare, because their main streets are nice and clean, sidewalks are wide open. In ours, people have to go over humps of snow and these little trails that people are creating and stuff. So again, here we are, we're towing people because they're leaving their cars in the streets, and yet we have a rule in the book that says you must clean your sidewalk, and people aren't cleaning it. So what can we do to get those, at least the laws that are in the book, enforced?
Well, it sounds like it's an enforcement issue. I don't know, I'd have to talk to the police chief. I can always write a letter to them, but they'll probably just put it in the trash. So we have to enforce the ordinance. I don't know how much of a fine, what is it, $50? Is it $50?
I think it was $50 per day.
So, let me research that, see what we can do with that.
Yeah, because, I mean, I understand that, because if I was a person whose car was towed because I did not follow the rules of the parking ban, and yet I'm looking at, or going to a bank, or going to an institution somewhere and the sidewalks aren't clean when there's laws in the book that says you must clean your sidewalk, I would have a problem with that. You know, again, why are you enforcing one and you're not enforcing the other? You know, so I think it's something, and we must send a message to the people around the city. It doesn't matter if you own a 3-decker or if you own a business, you got to clean those sidewalks, because it makes our downtown look worse than it does. It makes our city center look worse than it does when somebody can barely, and you've got people walking in the streets. You know, we talk about public safety, how everybody's so concerned with public safety, but anytime we get a snowstorm, you've got individuals walking on the streets because the sidewalks aren't clean. You know, so I hope
Also,
that...
I wish I had the funds to clean downtown every time it snows, but we don't.
But you know what?
To do snow removal.
But we have the ability to ticket them. You know, and if they're not gonna follow the rules, then they must pay for it. You know, and then we'll figure out a way to get somebody else to do it, you know? But they must do that because there's a law in the book that says that they need to do it.
We'll take a look at that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Before we do follow-ups, I just had one thought. I think Council Barnes made a good point on the Shaw School, but I was just thinking, would the state let us either use parking or snow dumping at the old Cristo site? That's something we should think about as
that's a
well.
good one,
I mean, it's
too,
just a
Well,
vacant...
hopefully, Counselor, it's not going to come to that this year.
What's that?
Hopefully, it's not going to come to that this year. I don't think it's going to snow, but,
Yeah, I like the way you think.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is just an
yeah.
open space
Well,
there.
that is state property, correct?
It's owned by the
Yeah,
Commonwealth.
so we could reach out to them if, when that point comes, which I hope it's not going to, but...
The other thing is relative to communication, and I concur with everything that's been stated tonight, but PSAs on billboards, the city of Brockton is entitled on the digital billboards on 24, and also some of the static ones, like right near the Brockton High on Belmont Street, one over near the old Christos, where we could do that, and also on the Bat Bus, placards on the Bat Bus. It might, these are just some communication thoughts that might come to fruition.
Okay.
Something to think about.
No, I know when we did that citywide meter change out, we put it in 4 different languages, and it really helped out. So, I mean, just like you said, we put little flyers in the water bills, and, okay, we can work on all this.
Azak, followed by
Yes.
Council Beauregard, please.
Quick question to Captain DeBarry. As far as the towing goes, just to clarify something, does the city get any benefit from, monetary benefit from the tows?
I believe they get a portion.
There is a portion that goes to the city? Okay. That was a question that was brought to me by a constituent. Thank you.
Council Beauregard.
First of all, thank you both for coming out tonight. The idea was to have a little bit more dialogue on this. And the emphasis was certainly on getting, people to be able to pull out of their own driveways, be able, because, a car or snow was blocking them, get the cars off the roads so emergency vehicles could get down. And also, so many individuals in this city have medical attention come to their home, visiting nurses, etc. And those are individuals that need to come regardless of the weather. And that was another instance where we were running into. But I am curious on this parking thing. If some people are always leaving their car out, and you're giving the tickets, and I believe that one of the things we should emphasize is how much does one ticket cost, and the second time you get a ticket, does it go up? And the third time? It's sort of like, when they say, oh, get your tickets by such and such a date, or otherwise at the door there'll be $10 more, so everybody just generally gets them ahead of time. Maybe if we can point out that, okay, first time it's $50, next time it's $100, next time it's, well, try to make some revenue here.
It's only $50 every time it's written, so.
Oh, maybe that's something else we should change. But it's 50, but you can turn around and put several tickets on one car for $50 each time.
Sure, yep.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Council,
Thank
point
you
of
again.
information, under the Mass General Law, a municipality, city, or town cannot benefit. It's a punitive civil fine.
No,
You
I
can't
understand.
profit from that under the law. So we'd have to talk to legislative council on that.
Oh, no,
Food for
that's...
thought on that.
Oh,
Any other
yes,
questions for these
that was the
gentlemen?
idea.
Counselor,
Yes, thank you.
just to answer your question on, we get many calls for nurses have to go to work, home health care comes to the homes. We try to open up those streets right away for those people.
Thank you. I understand.
Another thing I'd like you all to stress to your constituent is, we have a process when we plow. When we start plowing, we open up the streets, just to get an emergency vehicle in there. And then we'll come back and start widening the street and pushing the corners.
So that's why you do
But
that, okay.
we get a lot of I guess snow brings out the best of everybody. We get a lot of angry people that are saying, why do you keep going up and down my street? Well, it's because either we moved cars, or we just haven't got there yet to widen it out from curb to curb. And like I said, the first storm is very important to us, because we have to get that curb to curb. Because as the season grows and the snow grows, a 45-foot wide road could be 20. And we all experienced that in 2015. So please stress to your constituents, because there's very angry people out there when it snows. And we hear it all, and I could stay here all night and tell you some stories, but I won't. So please get that through when you have your ward meetings. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just do want to share a story, councilors. Two winters ago, 15, I get a call from Chilton Road up in Council Cruz's ward, Ward 1. Woman needed to go to the hospital for some type of 4:30 a.m. appointment, and I called Mr. Rowley, and they had that road plowed for that specific woman. It's just a resident, not a VIP, and nor should it be, but I just wanted to share that with you, that they were there by 4:30 in the morning, so she could make it to her oncologist in Boston. So it's good stories. Anything else before? I'm going to entertain a motion, please.
Move to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion made, properly second, favor recommendation back to the full council. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Yep.
All opposed, that motion carries. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Councilors, I do, before we conclude tonight, I do want to thank, special thanks on behalf of the entire city council to our colleague, Councilor Rodriguez, also the board and the members of the Cape Verdean Association. There was such a wonderful breakfast yesterday at the Cape Verde Association. President Fonseca from Cape Verde was there, and it was, and Mo, congratulations to you. It was great. And that's what it should be about in terms of inviting everybody to the table. I will, on the opposite, chastise right now City Hall. First elected Cape Verdean elected official is Moses Rodriguez. The City Council and Councilor Rodriguez was not invited to a planned visit last Thursday morning, Prime Minister of Cape Verde here. Pomp and circumstances. I happened to come in for a totally separate and almost chastised. Why wasn't the City Council here? There's no communication currently from this mayor's administration to the City Council. And in another example today, I'm sure we get the email for a groundbreaking ceremony tomorrow morning for the BRA. I don't know about you, but I work. So to try to get that within less than 24 hours, again, is unacceptable. So again, these are just examples. I don't know if it's political or not, but this hopefully will stop in the not-too-distant future, because it's just not right, and it really gives a bad taste in the mouth for the people that we serve that don't think city councils don't care. They're not showing up these things. We're not showing up because we don't know about them, and it's just not right. And I just wanted to share that tonight. Anything else before?
Mr. Chairman?
Councilor?
What is that groundbreaking? I didn't get that email.
I didn't either.
Email that came this morning about 11:30 on Lauriston Street.
Tomorrow morning at 10:30.
Yeah.
Yeah, at 1:30 Lawrencetown, yes.
It's getting, just a point of order in regards to that, because I received the phone call this morning at 9:30 from Mr. Jenkins, and he indicated to me that the people that were going to be invited were the 4 city councils at large and the ward councilor. So it is in my ward, so he did invite me, that's why I'm there. He did not extend it out to the
But
full city
it was a
council.
call today, Councilor, that's the point.
Right, he called me, exactly.
I mean, you can't, most people that are working can't do that, can't accommodate it. And then people will show up there saying, why aren't the city councilors there? It's just not right. So, frustration level's getting up here now. Councilor?
Actually, I think Councilor Azak was.
I have a moment of personal privilege, so this is after, I don't know.
We're
if
almost
this-
there.
Okay.
Councilor?
I do too, I'll defer.
Okay, Councilor Azak.
So a moment of personal privilege. I'd like to let everybody know that DW Fields Park Association is having their annual Tower Fest this Saturday, October 7th. It's from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. at DW Fields Park. And as always, there's going to be games, raffles. I think there's some wildlife demonstrations, and just lots of fun for the whole family. So hope to see everybody there this Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor?
May I also have a moment of privilege?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yesterday also, while the breakfast was going on, I apologize to my colleague, I was unable to go because I was actually saying goodbye to Reverend Walker. Yesterday was his, if people know him, he was the 35-year pastor of Messiah Baptist Church over at 80 Legion Parkway, and he announced earlier this year that he was going to be retiring, moving back to Texas, and yesterday was his last sermon. and his family, all of his family, they were all there. And I just want to publicly wish them well, tell them that on behalf of the city, I know we will all miss him. The church was packed, full of everybody that he's ever touched, and we just want to wish them well, and also good luck to the new pastor of Messiah Baptist Church, which is Pastor Riggins, and wish him well and to another 35.
Thank you, Council. We did a citation last week for Reverend Walker.
Oh, I was out.
Actually, he wasn't invited. He was invited. He wasn't able to attend because of a funeral.
Yes,
But it was
yes.
hand-delivered to the church by Council Beauregard.
Excellent. Thank you, Council Beauregard.
Anything else
And 8
before us,
o'clock yesterday
Councilors?
morning.
Have a great evening. This meeting's
Thank you.
adjourned.